I'm Mary Claire Murphy here with Logan Cooney, and thank you for joining FM 91 for this special edition of Classical Conversations, looking ahead to the fast-approaching Toledo Symphony event, Rick Steves' Europe, A Symphonic Journey. This concert to be held at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle on November 16th, 2024 at 8 p.m. The Toledo Symphony is a sponsor of programs on FM 91, and it is such a gift to have Rick Steves here in Toledo. Not only that, but right here in our studio at WGTE for a conversation on his globe-trotting adventures. Thank you so much, Rick, for stopping by.
Thanks, Mary Claire, for having me.
Now, our listeners may already be very well acquainted with you vicariously through your travel television series or your many travel guidebooks, but perhaps you could give us an overview of how you stepped onto this career path and ran with it.
Well, I've always, actually, I was going to say I've always traveled and liked traveling, but when I was a kid, I didn't even consider traveling, but my dad was a piano tuner, and he started importing pianos from Germany to Seattle. And I remember the day I came home from school, and my dad said, "Son, we're going to Germany to see the piano factories." And I thought, Dad, that's a stupid idea. But then we went over there, and it was really fascinating for me as a 14-year-old kid to go to these amazing piano factories and see the best pianos in the world being made, not on an assembly line, but like birthed in cells of a former monastery, this kind of thing, just this loving attention to detail and this heritage of fine classical music and this love of this art form. And then we went up to see relatives in Norway, and we did that for 2 years, and I realized, man, I could do this without my parents. I could go to Europe just for fun. And I've done that ever since. I used to be a piano teacher, and my kids would not practice in the summer. So I said, I'm not going to struggle with this. I'll see you in the fall.
I think a lot of kids have that struggle.
Yeah, and I've spent my summers in Europe ever since. And I was going to be a piano teacher. I just loved that work. And then, but I really fell in love with teaching travel. I was learning from my mistakes. Other people were making the same mistakes I made. I thought, boy, if they could just learn from my mistakes rather than their own, they could have a better trip the first time. And I'd have a good excuse to go back to Europe every year and update my material. So I've been doing that ever since. I let my piano students go. I had a recital hall. I turned it into a lecture hall, and now I teach travel. I go over there and make all the mistakes, take careful notes. When I get ripped off, I'm happy I was just ripped off because I'm going to learn that scam and bring it home and let other people see what's going on. And I've been doing the same thing now ever since I was a kid. That's a long time ago. And now I have a wonderful staff of 100 colleagues that are mission-driven just like me to help Americans travel smarter, and I've got technology beyond my wildest dreams to amplify my teaching, and that's what I do. I teach people how to travel. I like to joke our mission is to inspire and equip Americans to venture beyond Orlando. And Europe is the waiting pool for world exploration, so that's my beat. And it's a wonderful opportunity to teach and inspire Americans to get out there and come home with what I think is the best souvenir, and that's a broader perspective.
I'm glad that you do mention that musical influence in your background as well, because I feel like, even though music and travel may seem like kind of realms of their own, I do feel like they go nicely hand in hand. How do you conceptualize the connection there?
Well, a lot of things go hand in hand with travel. I mean, food and travel go hand in hand. Nature and travel go hand in hand. Music and travel go just as hand in hand. When I'm on the stage here in Toledo on Saturday, we're going to start off with America the Beautiful or something like that. And I'm going to say, don't you feel the pitter-patter of proud goosebumps when you hear that music? And I go, yeah, well, that's because that's the music of our homeland. Now, my challenge is, as your tour guide, is to take that wonderful, if ethnocentric, musical emotion on the road, and we're going to go to 7 countries in Europe and hear music that makes their hearts pitter-patter that mean really nothing to us. And we're going to broaden our perspective and see why, in Norway they love Grieg, and in the Czech Republic they love Smetana, and in Italy they love Verdi, and in Vienna they love Strauss. And then we're going to come back to the United States and have Stars and Stripes. But the point is, we're going to take our musical emotions on the road and celebrate this opportunity to get out there and broaden our perspective through music. But what I'm going to say is I get to mix. I'm in a great mood as a tour guide because I get to mix 3 of my favorite things: travel, history, and music. All of that mixes together. And with my musical background, I love to splice that into my work as a tour guide and a travel writer and a TV, travel show host and writing those scripts. And it's just a wonderland for anybody that likes music to be able to go to Europe.
You mentioned one of the best souvenirs of travel being just a broadened perspective. And how do you feel like your perspective has changed throughout the years in your travels?
Well, a musical example of that is going to India. And, people ask me, what's your favorite country? And they think I'm going to say France or Italy or something, because I'm kind of like all about Europe. But it really is India. And why? Because India rearranges my cultural furniture. It wallops my ethnocentrism. It gives me the most beautiful culture shock. And a lot of people say, well, you're supposed to avoid culture shock. Isn't that a travel tip? No, culture shock is a good thing. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective. And it just needs to be curated. And that's what I do as a travel writer and a tour guide. I think curate culture shock. And a good example of culture shock or walloping our ethnocentrism is to go to a place like India, where you realize, oh, I thought I knew what pain was. I thought I knew what time was. I thought I knew what love was. And then you go to India and you realize, no, I guess I didn't. I knew the American version of that. And in India, you learn that you may be the smartest musician here about, European-style classical music, and you may know all the modes and all the meters. And you go to India and you listen to classical Indian music, and it makes no sense, and it has no meter, and it has no modes like we're used to. And you realize, oh, but if you understand it, it's just as beautiful as ours. And that's what I love, is just to realize the more understanding you bring to your sightseeing, whether it's sightseeing for your eyes or your ears, the more you get out of it. That's my, I'm all about budget tips. How can you save money on going to the Louvre? Well, you can't. You've got to pay the same as everybody else. But if you understand the art, you'll enjoy it triple. So that makes it triple the value. And it's the same thing with music, I think. So when we do our Symphonic Journey concert on Saturday, what I like to do is I'll stand on stage for 2 minutes before each piece and give cultural context. And that will make that piece more thrilling, more enjoyable. We'll be able to understand what it's all about, because we'll be able to experience it in its time and in its context. And what's fun about this concert that we're going to do, what we call Rick Steves' Europe, a Symphonic Journey, is we're going to hear kind of like, not national anthems in the literal sense, but anthems that stir people's national pride in 7 different countries, all from the Romantic Age, all from the middle or late 1800s. Music from the same generation. Music in countries that were testing their nationality, that were striving for freedom and their place on the map. And I'll talk about how in the 1860s, we had our civil war going on, and it was about, are we 2 countries or 1 country? In the same decade, Germany had a war going on, and Italy had a war going on, and it was about, should we be unified? Germany was just a bunch of little tiny states that all spoke the same language with a vision that they could be 1 country. Italy was a bunch of little states that spoke the same language, but they were ruled by other countries, and they had their movement, the Risorgimento. And, Verdi was the great opera composer of the age, and his name was even a nationalistic slogan. Verdi, V-E-R-D-I, Victor Emmanuel Re d'Italia, Victor Emmanuel, the first king of Italy. And he ruled a little country called Piedmont. But the dream was that he would rule the united Italy. And when his operas came to town, people would pack the opera house, and they'd wait for the aria. And when the aria came, they'd literally stand on the seats and they'd sing all together as if crying in unison for Italian statehood. Can you imagine being there in the excitement of that opera when it meant Italian freedom from all of these Austrian and French overlords?
Now, you talk about building nationality, and I think we're seeing the pros and cons of that in the modern world today. I mean, it seems like we're becoming more insular, more fearful, not just the United States, but around the world. Mm-hmm. What's your remedy to that? How do we break that system in the direction that we think we're going in today?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's Logan, that's the topic of a talk that I give called Travel as a Political Act. And I give that all over the country. And it's, first of all, when I say nationalism in the context of this concert, it's a beautiful thing. To me, there's ugly nationalism, it's something when we travel, we can grow beyond. The beautiful thing about travel is it overcomes fear. My favorite and most valuable travel experiences have been when I go where my country says I'm not supposed to go. When I go to Cuba, when I go to Palestine, when I go to Iran, when I go to Russia. I wouldn't say to go to all of these countries during any period. You wouldn't go to some of them now, but when things are calm, those are very rich and rewarding travel experiences. I really miss the days when people used to say bon voyage. Do you remember when people said bon voyage?
Yeah.
What do they say now?
Good luck.
Have a safe trip.
Have a safe trip, right.
When somebody tells me have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, well, you have a safe stay at home. Where I'm going statistically is safer than where you're staying. There's no question about it. It's safer now to travel than it was back when people said bon voyage. And it's safer now to travel than to stay here in the United States.
You know, my wife and I just actually got back from the UK for the first time for our honeymoon, and we actually used some of your recommendations in London and Edinburgh. And, you know, we kind of had that thought, oh, we're Americans. What are they going to think of us? What are we going to run into? Yeah. And we met just some of the friendliest people there, and that really helped break down our preconceived notions as well. Isn't
that interesting? Yeah. Well, first of all, people like people. People don't always like those people's governments, but they like people. When I was in Iran, I experienced the friendliest welcome of any place I've ever been as an American. And I talk about that in my lectures at quite some length. The cool thing about travel is you get out there and you meet people, and they meet you, and then it makes it tougher for their government to demonize us with their propaganda, and it makes it tougher when we come home for our government to dehumanize them with our propaganda. If everybody traveled a little bit, this world would be a much more peaceful place. If every American traveled, we would have a totally different political landscape in this country. But think of the fear, and think of how fear motivates voters. And think of who the most frightened people are in our society. Who are they? People who let commercial news media shape their worldview. And the news media is not news, it is entertainment, because it's trying to be profitable. In the old days, when Walter Cronkite said, and that's the way it was to the best of their ability, because commercial networks saw as part of their corporate citizenship giving the news hour to our society without trying to make money. Now, for some reason, corporations have decided we can't afford that. We have to monetize everything, including the news. And if not enough people are watching, you don't get enough money for your ads, what do you got to do? You got to amp up the news, make it more dramatic. If it bleeds, it leads. That kind of more hysterical, more frightening. And then more people watch, and then you get more money for your ads, and that becomes viable. I'm so thankful for public broadcasting, because right here on this dial, WGTE, FM 91, you don't have to have fear-mongering news. You don't have to be thrilling. Maybe that's an odd thing to advertise. We're the most unthrilling news source, but that's because it's real news. It's not trying to sell ads. And I'm sad how our country is afraid. The flip side of fear is understanding. And as far as I'm concerned, we gain understanding when we travel or when we consume news that is actual news. That's why I go around the country and whenever I can support public broadcasting. It's a mission for me because I care about the fabric of our democracy and the strength of our community. And media is more impactful than ever, especially for our younger generation and especially for people that don't have the privilege of getting out and getting to know the world in a first-hand way. I'm so thankful that I've prioritized in my life to get out there and get to know the world because I get to bring home the most beautiful souvenir. And that's an understanding that this world is filled with beautiful people. It's filled with love. It's filled with joy. It's filled with families just like mine. Of course, there's some complicated problems and some bad apples out there. But generally, the more you travel, the more you realize that if you care about stability for your community and your family and safety, you don't need walls. You need bridges. Bridges are the key to stability and safety in the future. And I'm just so committed to that idea. And that's why I travel, and that's why I come home and share the lessons I learned from my travels.
Well, with that in mind, and it's so important, the work that you do. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the resources that you make available to the public.
Well, thank you. Yeah. In my company, content is king, and we really don't advertise ourselves in a conventional way. We just believe that our information is going to make friends, and then people will talk about us. So I produce public radio show. We've been doing it for 15 or 18 years now. I think I'm on 400 stations with a weekly show every hour.
Including FM 91?
I hope so. That's good. And that's a fun way for me not to have to be the expert, but to be the conduit between experts and our listening audience. And I just love that. On TV, we've been producing TV shows about Europe. I think we've done 150 episodes about traveling in Europe, plus specials that I really enjoy doing. I'm very thankful for that. I write guidebooks. We take about 30,000 people on our tours every year. And there's 40 itineraries, and most of those 30,000 people that went with us this year, they're return travelers. They've been with us before, and they know they like our style of travel. And what I just love to do is go over there and organize all this information and understand that Americans always want to stretch their travel dollar. And we've got the shortest vacations in the rich world. We want to get the most out of every day. And I just really love this idea that if you equip yourself with good information and if you expect yourself to travel smart, you can. So there's a lot of information on my website. It's all free. Every TV show I've ever made, every radio show I've ever made, all of our other content and lectures and language lessons and everything. And we have a whole community of people that like to travel smartly on their own, and we like to empower them to do that. And I find that travel is it's just a very, very important opportunity to broaden your perspective and also be more thankful than ever that you live right here in the United States of America.
To get a better sense of what a year looks like in the life of Rick Steves, what portion of the year would you say you spend actively traveling and touring versus planning or attending to other aspects of the business?
Yeah, Mary Claire, I've spent about 100 days a year ever since I was a kid in Europe, except for COVID, of course. And of those 100 days, probably a third of it is leading tours around, because I work with, that's the biggest part of our business as far as where the profit is. And then I spend about a third of that researching, writing guidebooks, and that's the foundation, is really knowing what's going on. And every day when I'm researching my guidebooks, and I still do that, I'm 69 years old and I still do that with as much vigor as ever. I just love doing this. It's my sort of fountain of youth, or my pure oxygen when I'm on the road. Every day I have two guides that I hire locally, one at 10 for daytime stuff, and then one at 6 for evening activities and restaurants. And then I stay up really late typing it all into my laptop and emailing it home for the guidebooks. And then what comes out of that is TV scripts. So I spend a third of that time, those 100 days, with my TV crew making shows for public television. And I know that it's just, for me, really, I was just in Iceland. It's kind of a mystery for a lot of people. So we did a 1-hour special that's aired on WGTE. We just finished a show on Poland. Poland did an hour special on Poland. It's a really underrated and misunderstood destination. It's just wonderful. And I just got back from the most decadent and hedonistic shoot I've ever been on. I went on a vacation a couple years ago with my girlfriend on a gourmet barge tour of Burgundy on a little boutique, a floating boutique hotel, just two rooms and a crew of 3, captain, first mate, and a chef. And we're gliding through the canals past the best vineyards in the world, and every morning going into the market and shopping, and every evening eating what we saw in the market. And I thought when I was on that vacation, I got to come back with the TV crew. So we just got back from that and just had a marvelous time filming that. And that's going to be the most delicious show I think we've ever produced. But, I've been doing this for a long time, and the cool thing is Europe never runs out of dimensions that you can enjoy as a traveler or enjoy filming as a TV host. I love nature, but I've never really done a serious hike. And then we filmed a bit about hiking around Mount Blanc, the tallest mountain in Europe, about as tall as Mount Rainier. It's a 100-mile hike. You do it in 10 days. We just filmed a little bit of it, but I thought I got to come back and do this. So that was another one of my recent vacations, and it was such a beautiful trip to hike around Mount Blanc. And then I realized there are venerable long-distance hikes all over Europe that anybody who's reasonably fit can enjoy. And that's another dimension of travel that, along with barging in the canals, that I had been traveling for 40 years and never even occurred to me. So that's good news for somebody who likes to travel, is you can never exhaust Europe of what it has to offer. And then, so just to finish your question, Mary Claire, about how I spend my time. So I spend 3 months or so in Europe doing that work. And then I've got 100 people in my office in Seattle, and I'm home the rest of the year, living a normal life and following up on all this content that we generate in Europe. And then I spend a good part of the time that I'm home running around the country like I'm doing right now, giving my lectures, helping out at public television and radio stations, and lately hosting the Symphonic Journey, which I'll be doing. I just did it in Louisville, Kentucky last week, and I'm doing it here this week, and I'll be doing it in Omaha in a few weeks. In fact, we filmed it in Cincinnati a couple months ago. We did 3 concerts, and CET, public television there, made a 1-hour special on this concert, and it'll air all over the United States in the coming months. So that'll be something that I'm happy will be on WGTE.
Yeah, well, and it's exciting, too, since the concert does have that cinematography piece of it that the audience members can enjoy.
Well, that's what we should say, and I guess that's what symphonies need to do now to kind of, amp it up, is to have visual dimension to it. So big screens come with a great orchestral performance. And this show has, I get to set each piece up as the tour guide. And then as I walk off, the orchestra plays and the video clips roll. And they take you to romantic era angles of that country that we're featuring. And all together, it's so much fun. And then we finish with a big finale of Ode to Joy by Beethoven. We celebrate the European Union. And then for the encore, we take it home with some John Philip Sousa.
Yeah, and there's such a nice message of brotherly love in the Ode to Joy as well.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
I love the mix of, like, as you said, you have the European nationalistic songs, but then you come back home to America as well. That leads me to my next question. I know you have a lot of history, not just traveling for fun, but also with charity work as well. I know you've partnered with Bread for the World for a number of years, and I believe you helped out with some building low income housing as well in the past. When people travel, when people get out of their bubble, do you hope that they carry that message along too? When they get home, they say, "Oh, I can actually do something in my own community now, and I can reimagine what the things around me in my own home as well."
Absolutely, that's a sensibility to me. That's just, you evolve in your thinking when you broaden your perspective through travel. Muhammad said, "Don't tell me how educated you are." 1,400 years ago, Muhammad said, "Tell me how much you've traveled." Thomas Jefferson wrote that travel makes a person wiser if less happy. And I'm so thankful that I'm burdened with the reality that we are great, but we are not any greater than anybody else. We are all children of God if you're a person of faith. And when you travel, you realize that suffering has nothing to do with proximity. It's silly to think that suffering across the street is more real than suffering across the sea. And if you're a real practical person, and if you believe everybody has equal worth, and you have X amount of ability to help out, that X amount of help will go 10 times as far south of the border. I'm not saying don't help out locally. I'm just saying you have the option to get the same joy out of helping people who are probably a little more different than your circle of friends south of the border or in the global south. And for me, that's a huge blessing because, as you said, I support Bread for the World. Bread for the World is an advocacy organization. To me, that's a very enlightened kind of philanthropy, to realize that I think you get the most bang for your buck when you help our government understand what's a good investment. And a very good investment in the United States is to invest in a more stable world. And that's one reason why I support Bread for the World. It's not just love your neighbor. It's a practical investment in stability. It's a practical investment in sustainability. It's a practical investment in having a world where our grandchildren can have the luxury of enjoying live classical music in each of their communities. There's so many great things that we can do if we can share with each other the lessons from travel.
Rick, I want to thank you for your comments and perspectives today. Is there anything you feel like we missed that you really would love to get out there and convey, either about the upcoming concert or your work in general?
Well, I love my work. I'm so thankful I found a niche, and that my niche is viable as a business. I'm put here to make mistakes on the road and come home and share the lessons from those mistakes, and I just love it. I just get such a kick out of it. And to be here in Toledo, remembering it's not Toledo, because the only Toledo I've been is in Spain.
We've heard that before.
I'm famously bad with my pronunciation of European towns, so I finally get it right, and then I come here and I got to get it wrong again. Excuse me, get it Ohio again, okay? So that's it's so fun to get on the road here and meet all the people I'm going to meet here and share these lessons. If people want to know more about what I do, it's pretty easy. Just go to my website at ricksteves.com or follow me on Facebook. And I'm thankful to have WGTE to be my platform here to share my love of travel and the value of travel, both on the radio and on television. And it's great to be here in person to celebrate what a great world we have to share.
This has been a conversation with Rick Steves, who is an esteemed authority on European travel. He's in our neck of the woods for the Toledo Symphony's special event, Rick Steves Europe, a Symphonic Journey. That is happening November 16th, 2024 at 8 p.m. at the Toledo Museum of Art, Peristyle. The Toledo Symphony is a sponsor of programs on FM 91. Rick, thank you for your conversation. Have a great rest of your stay in Toledo and happy travels.
Happy travels. Bon voyage. It's been a delight to be with both of you. Thank you.